Hello from USC. Connor Morrissette and Chris Trevino. We're in front of Heritage Hall. It's time for another edition of Instant Analysis. We just watched the Tuesday practice of mock game week. Didn't get much time watching practice today, Chris, which we'll get to. Let's start, though, with some injury updates. A few guys were back at practice today. Greedy Vance was in pads. Braylon Shelby was in pads. He'd missed some time. Kamari Ramsey was in pads as well. Good to see guys getting healthy.
And just a reminder, just because we saw them in pads does not mean they were full go for the rest of the practice. Obviously, we cannot report on that. Or would we even really know, because we got kicked out after, 10 seconds inside Howard Jones Field. But yes, having those guys back in pads, some guys who have missed some time, is great, obviously, when you're about a little over less than 2 weeks away from the start of the season, Connor.
One guy who was not there today, Zion Branch, the safety. He's dealt with injuries throughout his USC career. Lincoln Riley was asked about his status after practice, and he said he's dealing with a finger, not a pinky, so it could be his pinky, a finger injury, and he had a procedure on it. He's out a couple days. Hope he gets back soon, because he's a guy, Chris, if he's healthy, that just makes such a difference. Really highly ranked recruit, just hasn't had good injury luck.
Yeah, just you hate to have another procedure done, even though it's something small and minor that Lincoln Riley stressed that it's a super minor thing. And yeah, he said the finger, not really sure what that means. He says he doesn't expect him to miss more than a day. He's already missed some time though, so we'll see moving forward if that actually holds up being the case. But yeah, just tough luck for him having yet another surgery for Zion Branch. And again, we hope he comes back, because it can be an X factor. But as we've hinted or stated, have to be healthy and get on the field to actually have an impact.
Absolutely. We saw today, now that it's mock game week, some guys on scout team. If you're not a subscriber to USCfootball.com, you should be, because you'd see Chris's ghost notes and you'd already know all about the scout team observations. Who are some guys who were on scout team who stood out to you, Chris? And remind people what that means. And if you're on scout team, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to redshirt.
Yeah, absolutely. And, because of mock game week, it's kind of our first chance to see which freshmen are trending towards, potentially being impact players early in the season, and guys who need a little more time to get developed. Most of your freshman class is going to be on the scout team. And just a reminder, just because they're on the scout team now does not mean they're a lock to redshirt. There are certain special examples. Most of them will redshirt, but some of them will develop nicely. Elijah Page was sent down to the scout team at one point his freshman season. He developed nicely. So it's just a little extra gear of development for those guys. But we saw guys like Jade Abasiri and Cameron Fountain, Jade being a guy who's physically impressive. It's still raw, so it makes sense for him to go down to the scout team and get some grown man beatings down there from the first team offensive line. And hopefully he comes back maybe in the middle season and he's not wearing that scout team anymore. And then Cameron Fountain, one of their more highly touted defensive players in this cycle they just brought in. I think a lot of people expected him to contribute this year, but he also has a certain level of rawness to him. Shotgun Spradling, who went down to see him in Georgia, says that all the time. When I saw him, definitely very talented, but obviously very raw as well. So he was an early enrollee, got some time there in summer. I'm a little bit surprised that he's on scout team, because, he was here early in the summer and they do need edge rushers, but, I think that says where he is in his development right now, and he needs a little bit more time. But I would not be shocked if we saw him, contributing later down the season and not taking a redshirt.
Marcellus Williams and Braylon Conley were both with the scout team as well. Those are guys who have really impressed in the offseason, and if there's an injury at one of the corner spots, it sounds like the staff, I don't think they'd be thrilled to throw him into the fire, but those guys seem as ready as you possibly could be for true freshmen, especially Marcellus, who was here in the spring. We'll have more scout team updates as they come in, Chris, but we can keep some of these practice observations quick. Didn't get to see a whole lot. We got a front row seat to the punters today. There's 4 on USC's roster. Eddie Chaplicki, ball looks different coming off of his foot. Expect him to be the starter again. He was mentoring Ryan Sayeri, though, who's a true freshman. Maybe Sayeri is the punter of the future. I thought he was going to be more of a field goal kicker, but he was doing some punting today. It was cool to see those two working together. That's really all we saw, though.
Yeah, as you can see, we were desperate for things to talk about, because we're talking about punts. Not quite how they were booming, but punters indeed. So yeah, very, very short amount of time here in practice. I forgot how limited time we get actually kind of during the season. Right after team warm-ups, we were quickly booted out of practice.
One more note on scout team, too, if you're just unaware. It's when you're a reserve and you go up against the starting unit. So like a Marcellus Williams, he'll be going up against USC's best receivers, up against Miller Moss as the quarterback, stuff like that. Let's get into, though, Chris, what we heard after practice. So Lincoln Riley spoke first. He addressed naming Miller Moss the starting quarterback for USC. He said the competition was very close with Jade Maeva, but ultimately Miller Moss gave USC the best chance to win, is what Riley said. It seems like that's been sort of the case since the Holiday Bowl to now. That really hasn't wavered, in my opinion. After the spring game, Riley talked about how, hey, if the season started next week, would go with Miller Moss. Jaden pushed him, it sounds like, but this was always the thing that was the most likely to happen, and Miller will start the game against LSU.
Yeah, we're not surprised by that at all. Obviously he's a guy who's worked really hard, waited, been patient. This was his offseason to go and secure it. You felt like he did that in the Holiday Bowl, but it's still a super long offseason. Didn't really know who they were going to bring in to compete with him for that quarterback spot, so he had to go out, look at somebody else on the field, and beat them in competition. That happened to be Jaden Maeva, very talented young signal caller. But yes, Miller Moss and his experience in this offense gave him a little bit of edge there, and he went out and did it. He competed through all spring, competed all through fall, and he gets the right to be the QB1 going into the season. Obviously, things could change, but the whole team's behind him. This is his team. This is his offense, and yeah, he joins a very impressive list of starting quarterbacks under Lincoln Riley.
And Miller was asked about being a part of that group with Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray and Caleb Williams, so many really talented signal callers, and he said, I'm not there yet, which to me made it sound like I haven't started the season for USC yet. We still have 12 days, but it also sort of sounded to me, Chris, like he wants to keep getting better and keep improving, and he knows that just because he's starting for USC under Lincoln Riley, he's not necessarily in that group. Those guys accomplished a whole lot, and while Miller has dreams of doing the same, he still has a lot to prove.
Yeah, for me it was the latter that he was talking about, in that, yes, he's technically a starting quarterback for Lincoln Riley, but he's not among those names that we just mentioned, guys who have gone on to the NFL, have been really great starters under Lincoln Riley. Yes, he is technically a starter for the season, but he's got to go out and prove he deserves to be among those names. And, I think the quote he said is that, he's happy to have the opportunity to be among those impressive groups, those Bakers, the Kylers, the Calebs. And if he puts up impressive numbers, yeah, his name is going to go alongside those guys as well. Is he number one overall pick? I don't know about that, but if he can be a damn good college quarterback, I think a lot of USC fans would be ecstatic at that, and Lincoln Riley as well.
The other two quarterbacks who have started seasons with Lincoln Riley, Jalen Hurts, of course, after transfer from Alabama, and then Spencer Rattler, who ultimately left to go to South Carolina after Caleb Williams beat him out. But look at Rattler, wasn't picked too early in the draft. All accounts, though, he's impressing in New Orleans right now in the NFL. So it's really good to be coached by Lincoln Riley if you're a quarterback, Chris. That much is obvious. The other interesting thing from Riley today, he gave some information about the running back depth chart. Said Woody Marks was the starter, not really a big surprise there. Quentin Joyner separated himself as the backup, was what Riley said as well, and that wasn't a surprise, but we hadn't really heard a lot about Joyner, and it just felt good to get some clarity on the running back depth chart. He also said we're really happy with the other two guys, Brian Jackson, the true freshman, and Amarian Peterson, who's in his second season, but it sounds like it's going to be a lot of Woody Marks and then Quentin Joyner behind him.
Yeah, not shocked about that. We all pegged Woody Marks to be the guy in that backfield, the older guy, the old head, the OG, the guy with the most experience. And then Quentin Joyner, who we saw, last year kind of get that experience and flash a little bit, but obviously buried behind a very talented veteran room with, Marshawn Lloyd, Austin Jones, even Darren Barlow came in at times. He was the third guy off the bench, and Quentin Joyner got some of that spot play. This is his opportunity. He's going to be the backup, and they're kind of different kinds of running backs, so he's going to be able to carve out his own sort of role with his offense. We'll see what it looks like, if it's a true kind of rotation or it's more like Woody Marks, a little Quentin Joyner, a little Quentin Joyner, a little Quentin Joyner. We don't know what that's going to look like, but they are two different kind of players, so you could even have them on the field at the same time. So really excited to see what that Marks Joyner combo looks like. And yeah, Brian Jackson has been impressing. Marion Peterson is a big running back, could be a short yardage guy. Both of those guys actually could be short yardage because they're huge. I kind of feel like all four of those guys might have a role at some point during the season.
Especially with injuries. One guy goes down, you only have four. Someone's going to have to fill in. I spoke with Alani Noah, the projected right guard starter right now. He said Gino's pushing him, Amos is back healthy, and he's been pushing him, Amos Talele, so that's not set in stone, and Riley said that as well. Alani Noah still has some work to do. I thought the most interesting part of our conversation, Chris, I asked him, there's a concern out there about the USC offensive line because of the inexperience. Guys like you haven't played a lot, projected starter. Elijah Page hasn't played a lot, projected starter. And I really liked what Alani said. He said, I understand the concern. It makes sense, but we have a great opportunity to go out there and show people that we are ready. And I think that's the perfect response. You got to play eventually. That's what Josh Henson's talked all about. Yes, they missed some guys in the transfer portal and some guys on the recruiting trail, but they do have a deeper group of offensive linemen compared to where they've been in the past couple of years. Yes, it's a younger group, but these guys, like Henson said, they have to play, and Noah and Page, they're going to be thrown into the fire, and it's all about development. Lincoln Riley wants to be a program that develops. They're going to have to put up or shut up, especially against especially in week one against LSU. So I'm fascinated to see how that all comes together, and hearing Noah say, yeah, I get that we're inexperienced, but we got a great opportunity. That gave me, I don't know about confidence, but that just made me feel a little bit better about the situation.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, just in general, football is a big case of unknowns. You know, especially now, and you just have to throw those guys out into the deep end and see if they sink or swim. A lot of them sink, a lot of them, swim. So we'll see who is in the latter, and that's been the thing since the age of time, the beginning of time. How are we going to know if Elijah Page is the franchise left tackle of the future? He's got to start games. He's got to go against teams like LSU and Michigan and those guys. He's got to get those battle scars out there on the field. So we don't know. I think it's a little more scarier. It's less scary when you think about like a position like running back or wide receiver, but like offensive line, that's a super scary thing to have to rely on sort of young players. And especially if you're a guy like Miller Moss, got to protect your quarterback, the most important job out there on the field. So yeah, I can understand why there's a little hand wringing, and their depth isn't great, and it's all a lot of young guys, but you just hope they can get those reps, stay afloat as long as they can, because there will be growing pains. I'm going to tell you right now, there will be growing pains. This is a new group, there's some new guys, but you're hoping they find that chemistry, they find that groove. And yeah, they take their lumps, but then they start dishing out lumps down the line. And again, it's just really tough to have LSU as your first game for a guy like Elijah Page, Lonnie Noah, Mason Murphy even, kind of taking over a right tackle spot. So it's going to be really interesting, and you just hope that development hits this season.
The good news for that USC offensive line is that LSU actually isn't too scary on the defensive line. They're scarier on offense, and they have a lot of unknowns defensively, similarly to USC. I think you can make the case that USC feels better about its defense than LSU does. New defensive coordinator for both programs. They were looking at defensive tackle help in the portal. They have Harold Perkins, the 5-star linebacker who used to be an edge rusher, transitioned to linebacker last season, and people think he's going to take a big step forward. But outside of him, I don't think there's anyone on that roster, and it's like, okay, that's a matchup you're definitely going to lose. So that could be a good sign for USC. Not an easy game by any stretch, but could be a lot worse if you're going up against a front like a Michigan in that first game, where they're playing them in a couple of weeks, so maybe not the best example, but you play them that first game, that presents a very unique challenge. Chris, we can wrap up here. You spoke with backup tight end Cade Eldridge. What did you learn from what he had to say?
He's just really excited about, the increased opportunity he's probably going to have this season. Obviously, it's a really young room. He is sort of the old young guy as a redshirt freshman behind Lake McCree. He has the most experience out of anyone who has 0 career snaps, and he's barely above that, having played in 1 game last year. But he's really improved on his blocking. That was the kind of thing he kept hitting on. And as we mentioned last week, Zach Hansen said his blocking has really come a long way. He's a guy who played running back in high school, so that took some time, that adjustment. And he's really excited to go show his improvements as a blocker, because he's the biggest, kind of beefiest tight end that they have. And if he can establish himself as that key blocking guy, he's going to see the field a lot this season, especially in the Big Ten.
He's Chris Trevino. I'm Connor Morrissette. This has been Instant Analysis. You will not see Chris tomorrow because Jack Smith, our beloved intern, is coming back. He will take over my duties as the host, and Chris and I will rotate as co-hosts. So maybe you will go tomorrow. Maybe I'll go tomorrow. Well, it'll be one of us with Jack Smith, probably me. Great to have Jack back. Excited to see him tomorrow. But like I said, he's Chris. I'm Connor. This has been Instant Analysis, and we'll see you next time.